Hello and welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to get started with data frame manipulation with the Pandas library. We're going to start by thinking about how to subset your columns. Often your data arrives with many more columns than you actually require for your data analysis, and you need a way to subset those columns to just the things that you want. In this lesson, we're going to look at a number of ways to do this, so let's get started. Here is our list of learning objectives. If you like, you can pause the video and read through these, but we'll come back to them at the end of the lesson. So I'm going to start by opening up my Start menu and searching for Visual Studio Code. And let's open that up. And then you can open up this Graph Courses Python folder either by clicking on the File menu, File, and Open Folder. And you click here on Graph Courses Python, or you can just drag the Graph Courses Python folder directly into your editor, and it should open up in VS Code. In this lesson, we're going to be writing our code in Quarto. If you haven't seen our lesson on Quarto, do watch that. Otherwise, you can work in whatever notebook is familiar to you. But I'm working in Quarto here, so I'll go ahead and create a new file. And let's call it Pandas Subset Columns. So Pandas is the library we're going to be using, and we're learning about subsetting columns. And let's give it a .qmd extension. So .qmd stands for Quarto Markdown. And we can give it a title with the first level header. Let's call it Subsetting Columns. And let's make our first section and call it Imports. And make a new code chunk. Hopefully you remember the shortcuts to make a code chunk. It's Control-Shift-I on Windows or Command-Shift-I on Mac. So I've typed Control-Shift-I. If you really hate shortcuts, you can also use this ellipsis icon here at the top right, and then click on Insert Code Cell. And for this lesson, we're only going to be using the Pandas library. So let's import Pandas as PD, and let's click to run cell. So I believe that worked. Maybe I can make a little bit more space for my code. So I'm going to hide the Explorer by clicking on this Explorer button, and I'll zoom out a little bit. And now let's import our dataset. To get your data, we'll provide a download link for today's dataset beneath the video. So you can just copy that link or click on the button if there's a button, and then paste it in your address bar. And let's download that file. And from my downloads folder, I can click to open that file. But after opening it, I want to make sure if I'm on Windows that I click this Extract All button and then accept and click on Extract. And since we're here now, for Windows users, there's a little setting that I think is going to be useful for your developer career. And to access that, you should click on this ellipses icon inside of your File Explorer, and then click on Options. And then under the View tab here, the second tab, I'm going to do the following. First of all, I'm going to tell Windows to show my hidden files, folders, and drives. Okay. And then I'm going to uncheck these first two hide empty drives and hide extensions for known file types. So Windows has a number of things that it hides from the user, so the interface looks very simple. But now that you're a programmer, you can handle this complexity. Once that's done, you can click on OK. And now you should see Yaoundé data.csv rather than just Yaoundé data. And it's helpful to know that this is a CSV file. So now we just want to take the CSV file and put it in a data subfolder of our Graph Courses Python folder. Hopefully you know how to do this. I'll show you a few ways. One way is we can just copy it. So with Control-C, we copy that file. And then I'm going to go to my desktop, Graph Courses Python. And then in here, I can either right-click to create a new folder, or I can click on this icon here, New Folder. And let's call it data. And then into data there, I can place my CSV with Control-V. So that's one way you can do it. Let me delete this and show just another simple way. So instead of doing it from your File Explorer, you can access the same folder, of course, from VS Code. So within VS Code here, we can do a right click and then New Folder and then Data. But in this case, instead of Control-C, Control-V, what we'd rather do is just drag it from here into VS Code. So I'm going to drag it from my File Explorer into the VS Code data folder. So copy that way. Hopefully all of that is already familiar to you. Now we're going to import that dataset into our working environment. So I'll make a new code chunk. And then in here, I'm going to define an object or variable called Yao, which stands for Yaoundé. And then I use the pd.read_csv function from Pandas. And then I'm going to access my data folder here. So inside of quotes, I'm going to put data/Yaoundé data.csv. Yaoundé data.csv. Right? And on the next line, let's print that data frame so we can see what it looks like. Right? So here on the right now, I can see my data frame. As you can see at the bottom, it has 971 rows and 53 columns. So this data is from a COVID seroprevalence survey in Yaoundé, Cameroon. Seroprevalence tries to quantify how many people have had COVID in the past. So we have information like their ages, their sexes, what drugs they're on, their height. Now, if you want to view the whole data set, what you can do is click on this Variables tab at the top right, and it will open up the current variables we have defined. And now I can click on this icon beside Yao, and this should normally allow me to view the data frame, but it says I need to install a data viewer extension. So let's click yes to see the recommended extensions. And the recommended one is Data Wrangler from Microsoft. So let's install that. And now we can close that extensions tab. And then let's again click to view Yao. So we need to allow this extension to execute code. Click on allow. And now you have this very nice view of all of the data in that data frame. As you can see, for the numeric columns, there's a histogram showing the distribution. And for the categorical columns, you can see some of the most common values as well. And now let's make a new subsection and call it selecting columns with square brackets. And so in Pandas, a simple square bracket notation is the most common way to select your columns. Let's see how to do this. I'm going to open a new code chunk with Control-Shift-I or Command-Shift-I if you're on Mac. And then let's type Yao, the name of our data frame, and then two sets of square brackets. And let's put two variables from the dataset. And we're going to select the age variable and the sex variable from the dataset. So let's put in age, comma, sex. And I press Control-Enter to run this. And now you can see we have a subset with just age and sex. Now note that we do need these double square brackets. If you put a single square bracket, you will get some kind of error. Let's try that. Control-Shift-I, and then Yao, single square brackets, age, comma, sex. If you run this now, we're going to get a key error. So the first square bracket is defining a list, and then it's the second square brackets that is allowing us to access the variables inside of Yao. Now, because this code is faulty, let's not leave it in our script. Let's comment it out. Let's say this code does not work, and we put a comment before the line of code so it doesn't run when we try to render this document. Now, if you want to select a single column, you can use single square brackets, but that is going to extract out that column such that it is no longer a data frame. So let's see what I mean. If I type Yao and then single square brackets and age, here we've extracted this, but it's no longer a data frame. Let's compare that with the output of, open a new code chunk, and let's do the double square brackets, and you'll see this will be returned still as a data frame. So let's put double square bracket there, and now you can see this is still actually a Pandas data frame. Let's make a new subsection and call it storing data subsets. A common point of confusion for students is they assume that code, for example, like this, is actually modifying the Yao data frame itself. It's not modifying the Yao data frame. It's just extracting specific columns for you to view them. And so if you looked at the Yao data frame itself, it will still have all of its column names. So to demonstrate this, let me copy this code over here, Control-C, and paste it down here. And let's run it one more time to see our age and sex columns. Now, if in a new code chunk, I print just Yao, you'll see that Yao is still the full data frame with all of its columns. So if you actually wanted to modify the data frame, how would you do that? Well, usually what you do is you create a new data frame that's just a subset. So for example, here I could create Yao underscore subset and set that equal to the value of this. So let's run that. And then now in the next line, we can print Yao subset, and we can see Yao subset has only 2 columns. If you want to modify the same named data frame, you could do something similar. So in a new code chunk, let's type Yao subset. And we're going to overwrite Yao subset with the value of Yao subset subsetted only to the age column. Okay, so before you run this code, make sure you understand what's happening. Here, if we run just this line, you can see we have two columns. And now we're about to extract only one column and overwrite the old Yao subset with this value. So let's run this. And let's print Yao subset underneath here. And now you can see the new Yao subset has only one column, which is age. Okay, so now with all of that in mind, let's have you do a practice question. So I'll call it a practice Q, and I say select columns with square brackets, with the square brackets. And I'll say use the square brackets operators to select the weight kg, and height cm variables in the Yao data frame and assign the result to a new data frame called Yao underscore weight underscore height. So open up a new code chunk, pause the video, and try that out. Sometimes it's easier to drop columns that you don't need than it is to explicitly select the columns that you do need. For this, we're going to see the drop method in Pandas. So let's open up a new subsection and call it excluding columns with drop. And let's see a brief example using, again, the Yao data frame. So first, let's print the Yao data frame. And you can see this version has the age column within it. So it has age. But we can drop that using the .drop method. And if you hover over the method, you should see the list of different arguments. The one we're going to use is this one called columns that helps us define the columns to drop. So let's say columns equals, and we provide a list of columns. For now, let's just drop age. So if I run this now, you see that in the printed output, we've lost age. So we just have date surveyed and then straight to age category, whereas before we had the age column in there. Similarly, we can drop several columns. So again, type yao.drop, and let's drop both age and age category. So we type age, comma, age category. And now you should see that both of those columns are dropped from this data frame. And we can confirm that by seeing that we have only 51 columns instead of the 53 that we used to have. Now, again, note that these lines are not modifying the Yao data frame itself. They're just creating a copy that gets printed out to your console. If you want to modify the data frame itself, you need to create a new variable or overwrite the existing variable. Okay, so that's a pretty simple concept, but make sure you get some practice with it. Let me give you this practice question. Practice Q, let's say drop columns with drop. And what I want you to do is, again, from the Yao data frame, remove the columns highest education, and consultation. And I want you to assign the result to a new data frame, which you can call Yao no education consultation. And then when you're done, print that new data frame. Print that new data frame. Now, sometimes instead of selecting single columns or dropping single columns, you want to select a range of columns by a specific pattern in their names. For this, we can use the filter method on Pandas data frames. So let's open up a new subsection and call it using filter to select columns by regex. And what is regex? Regex basically stands for regular expressions. And they provide a way to use symbols to point at specific parts of strings. So as a very simple example, let's start with the following, yao.filter, and we're going to select all columns that have the string ig in them. And so if we hover over the filter function, you should see the different arguments. We can see regex there, and you can see the definition of the regex. So let's use that, regex or regex, depending on your preference. And let's subset all columns that have ig in them. And here are those with IG. You have highest education, weight kg. And the ones we actually care about are these ones, IgG result and IgM result. Ig stands for immunoglobulin, and those are the specific antibodies that indicate whether the person has had COVID or not. So instead of just selecting for all columns that have Ig, we may want to select for columns that start with Ig. And for this, we're going to use a simple piece of regex. So let me copy all of this and paste it again. And instead of regex equals Ig, we're just going to put a caret symbol here. Hopefully you know where that is on your keyboard. And this caret symbol is regex for starts with. So now let's run that. And you can see that the result is just IgG result and IgM result, which both start with Ig. Let's put a comment there so you can remember that. Starts with Ig. And in a new section now, let's filter for columns that end with the word result. So yao.filter and set regex equals result and then $. And let's put a comment to explain what this is. This means ends with result. And let's run that. And you can see we have the same output for all the columns that end with result. Now, regex symbols are notoriously hard to remember, so I don't recommend that you try to memorize any of this. You can always look it up on Google or on ChatGPT. On Google, you can search for regex cheat sheets, and you can find very nice compilations of specific regex. Or, of course, you could just ask ChatGPT. For example, I'll say, what is the regex? What is the regex for strings that end with the word result? And it gives us this regex, which is a little bit more complicated than what we need, but we can copy it anyways. And let's see if it gives us the same output here for columns that end with result. Okay. And indeed, we still have the same output. So ChatGPT is correct. Now let's have you do some practice on this. Let's call this a practice queue. And we say select columns with regex. And what I want you to do is select all the columns in the Yao data frame that start with is, and assign the result to a new data frame called Yao is columns. And actually, let's make that the string is underscore. So is underscore rather than just is. Now let's open up a new section and call it changing column names with rename. So the rename method can be used to rename column names. And obviously this is something that is going to be often useful. Let's see how to do this. We're going to type yao.rename. And if you hover over the method, you can look at the documentation. And there's some nice examples here for how to use this. So as you can see, it takes a columns argument and then a dictionary, and then the old name, colon, new name, comma, old name, colon, new name. So it's pretty easy to use. Let's see how to do it. So we're going to rename age to patient age. So let's create columns equals, open a dictionary, and then age, let's rename that to patient age, and then comma, press enter, and let's also rename sex to patient sex. And now if I press Control Enter to run this and I look at our output data frame, you can see we have patient age and also patient sex. Very nice and very easy. Let's have you do a practice question. Let's call it rename columns with rename. And what you're going to do is rename the age category column in the Yao data frame to age cat and assign the result to a new data frame called Yao age underscore cat. So pause the video and try that out. And now for our final section, let's create a subsection called cleaning messy column names. So as you can imagine, the rename function can be useful for cleaning a range of messy column names. I'll show you what I mean by messy column names in a second. So I'm going to open up a new code chunk and I've pasted some code in here, which you should pause the video and type yourself. So I'm creating a data frame out of a dictionary, and you have 3 different column names, good name, bad name, and bad name 2. And each of those is just going to have 3 values, 0, 1, 2, which I define with range 3. So if I press Control Enter to run this cell, and let's see the output. Okay. So you can see our 3 different names. And we call these bad names because, as you know, generally your name should only have letters and underscores. So when you have a space like this, that makes things a bit hard. And also when you have random characters like these as well. One of the reasons for this good name, bad name dichotomy I'm trying to point out is that later we're going to learn about something called dot syntax for accessing column names inside of a data frame. So let me open a new code chunk and show you that. So if I type test df and then dot, I can access, for example, good name here, and press Control Enter to run that, and it returns that output there. So it extracts that specific column, but it's no longer a data frame, as you can see. But if I try doing the same thing on bad name, it's not going to work because there's that space, and that will break Python. So this gives an error. So let's put a comment here and say bad names are not accessible through dot syntax. And let's comment this out as well. Now that we've established why good names are good, let's see how we can clean names with the right functions. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to type the test df, and we can extract the columns from that test df with dot columns. And that prints these three names, good name, and bad name 2. And we're going to use a method that you haven't learned yet, which is string replace. So str dot replace. And we're going to give a series of arguments here that may look like gibberish to you. And the first argument here is going to be what we want to replace. We're going to use regex to identify that. And we start with the letter R to indicate regex. And then we open up a pair of quotes. And in here, we're going to type the following regex. So first, open and close square brackets, then a caret, and then type with me A to Z, small letters, then A to Z, big letters, then 0 to 9. And here I'm typing hyphens in between those, as you can see. So what this regex says is, grab me everything that is not a small letter, a big letter, or a number. And now I'm going to replace any of those weird characters with an underscore. And finally, I'm going to set the regex argument to true. So now we can see that bad name has become a good name because we replaced the space with an underscore. And same thing for bad name 2, we replaced those weird characters also with underscores. And now finally what we'll do is we'll overwrite the original columns index, the original columns list, with this cleaned version. So I'm going to type test underscore df dot columns, and I'm going to store within this cleaned version. So it's going to overwrite the existing one with this cleaned version. And now if I run this, and let's finally print test df again. So test df. Now you see that the test df now has clean names. So let's go through that again step by step. We have our original test df, and we extract the columns from it with this code. Then we use the string.replace method on that list of columns. Then within string.replace, we use regex to indicate that anything that is not alphanumeric, that is just a letter or a number, replace that with an underscore, and we use this regex equals true command, and we assign all of that to overwrite the existing testdf.columns. Now, this is code that I don't actually expect you to remember verbatim, but I'm giving it to you because you can copy it and use it in your future scripts because it's a very handy line of code. And now I want you to do some practice with that. So let's set up a practice question, and I'll say clean column names with regex. And again, I'll paste in some code to define a custom data frame. So you have to type this up. And I'll say consider the data frame defined below. Use the str.replace method to clean the column names. So you just have to pattern match on the code we wrote above to this example. So we've now gotten through this lesson. Here are some basic learning objectives that I hope you have mastered by now. So you should now be able to keep or drop columns from a data frame using square brackets, the filter method, or the drop method. So here is that square bracket method here. And here's the filter method, which allows us to use regex. And finally, here's that drop method where you provide a columns argument and set that to be equal to a list of columns you want to drop. And you know how to use simple regex patterns within that filter method. You should also know how to use the rename function to change column names. So here's the basic syntax for that. If you've forgotten, you have the columns argument, you give it a dictionary, and then you provide the key value pairs for that dictionary with old name set to new name. And finally, you can use that simple piece of regex and str replace that I gave you to clean your column names. So congrats on getting through this lesson. You now have the basic tools to manipulate the columns in your data frames by selecting them or dropping them or renaming them. These are actions you're going to take in any data project you work on. So hopefully you feel somewhat confident with this task. For now, I'll sign off and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.
For more resources, visit our website where you can track your progress, access interactive quizzes and lesson notes, and connect with our teachers and other learners like you. And if you'd like a more guided experience, we also offer live online bootcamps with expert help. So join us at thegraphcourses.org to start your learning journey today.